Hey there and welcome. Today we are going to describe and identify all parts of a coordinate plane by defining and labeling. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we need to do is quite a few definitions. And our first definition is a coordinate point. And a coordinate point is just a location on a graph. And it's also known as an ordered pair. The purpose of a coordinate point or an ordered pair is for mapping and locating. So a real life example of this would be like a GPS. GPS uses things that we call longitude and latitude, which basically takes the globe and puts it on a coordinate plane to figure out where you are located and actually pinpoint that one specific location. So again, a coordinate point's purpose is just for mapping and locating. And it's important to note that coordinate points are comprised of x and y, and we always write it in the order of x, y, so alphabetical, where x moves in our graph left and right, and y moves on the graph up and down. So we go left or right first, and then we go up or down second. The next definition that we have is an axis. And an axis is just either that x-axis, which again is going sideways, or the y-axis, which goes up and down. And it's basically just what our graph is made of to be able to use that mapping and locating. So our next word that we're going to define is origin. And it's really just the point 0, 0, where both x and y are 0, because it's the point where those two axes intersect with each other. So most of the time you'll see that the origin is the center of the graph that you're given. But don't assume that it's always the center. Sometimes it moves off to one side or another depending on the height or the length of a graph. But it is always that point where the x and y axes cross. So again, it's at the point 0, 0. And the last word that we're going to define today is quadrant. And there are 4 quadrants that we have on a graph, and we write them using Roman numerals. And it's basically just sections of the graph that are made from those axes. And so there you have it. Those are the definitions that we need to know for our graphing section. So now let's actually put all of this onto the graph. So the first thing that we're going to do is label our axes. And so the way that we're going to do this is, if you remember, we said that the x-axis goes left and right. So I'm going to call this one x. And then over here, I'm going to call it negative x because it's where my x values are negative. And so it just helps visualize later on where each of those points are. And then for our other axis, remember that's y, and that goes up and down. So up here at the top, I'm going to write positive y, because that's where the numbers are positive. And then down here at the bottom, I'm going to write negative y, because those numbers are negative. All right, axes, check. All right, the next one that we need to label is the origin. And remember, that's at the point 0, 0. It's where we start with our graphing pretty much always. And it's where those two axes cross. So that point is right here, and I'm going to label it as the origin. Perfect. So the numbers for this one is super important because we need to realize that when we're graphing and we're using these points, we're actually looking at the lines of the graph, not the boxes that are made from the lines. So I'm going to zoom in real quick so that we can see it real close. Right, so if right here is the origin, then this line here is 1, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And then in that opposite direction, it's -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, and so on. And it's on the actual lines themselves, not the boxes that the lines make. And that's just something that happens a lot, is that people just think that it's the boxes and they're not looking at the lines. And then here we have +1, +2, +3, and so on. -1, -2, -3, and so on. So we have to remember when it comes to those numberings, it's the actual line of the graph, not the box of the graph. So that's what we mean by numbers. All right, the next one is the quadrants. And remember, we write them in Roman numerals. And we always are going to start in this first one over here. This one is quadrant 1. The reasoning is because everything here is positive. And then over here we have quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. And the easiest way to remember where to start and where to end is if you actually draw the letter C, it goes through all 4 quadrants in the correct order. Now, I don't really have a trick for how to remember that it's a C that you're supposed to draw to remember where all 4 quadrants go, but I think that the easiest way is to think that quadrant kind of sounds like it could possibly start with a C. It doesn't, but it sounds like it could. So those are our quadrants. And then for the signs, it's talking about our X and Y's. Which one is positive, which one is negative, and where are they? So in quadrant 1, X is going to be positive and Y is going to be positive, which is why that's where we start most of the time. Quadrant 2, X is negative and Y is positive. In quadrant 3, both X and Y are negative. And in quadrant 4, X is positive, Y is negative. Now, you don't actually need to remember this fact so long as you have your axes labeled properly. It shows that to you already. And so it's good to know for sure, and it's a great check if you do memorize it. But if you don't memorize that exactly perfectly, just label your axes and you'll be good to go. All right, so now let's actually do some practice. Oop, there it is. So we're going to graph these points in groups. And what that means is these 3 points are green, so we're going to graph these 3 points and connect those dots. And then separately, we're going to connect these 3 dots because those ones are all the same color. And then lastly, we'll do those 3 dots completely separate. So let's start with this first group, -7, 7. And remember that it goes X, Y. So the first thing I'm going to do is label my axes so I don't forget. So I have X, Y, -X, scroll just a smidge, and -Y. So now I don't have to really think a whole ton. I already have it there and labeled nicely for me. So since X is -7, I'm going to go to the left towards my -X 7 times. And then Y is +7, so I'm going to go towards the +Y 7 times and place a dot there. And I'm going to label this, I'm going to erase that part real quick. I'm going to label it A sub 1, just so that I know where that point is, but I'm not having to write the ordered pair because it's kind of a lot when you have to write it multiple times. So if that one's A sub 1, then this next one will be A sub 2, and then that third one will be A sub 3. So for A sub 2, it's telling me that I'm going to go to the left one and then up one. So I'm going to go to the left one and then up one, draw my circle, my dot, label it A sub 2, and that point is good to go. All right, so for this third one, it says to the right 2 and then down 2. So I'm going to move to the right 2 spaces. And remember that when we get these points, we always start at the origin. So we're going to move to the right 2 spaces and then down 2 spaces. Draw that dot, A sub 3, and then connect our 3 points together. I recommend that for the next 6 points, you try those on your own and see how you do. So go ahead and pause the video and try that out. All right, and this is what that final answer for those other 6 points should look like. And you'll notice that over in this section here, we have points that are crossing each other and going over other lines, and that's totally fine. It's absolutely acceptable. Don't freak out about it. Generally, it's supposed to happen, and later on in other math classes, you'll realize that it actually means something. All right, so we've got one more section here. We're going to now look at the points that we have, and we're going to write down where they're actually located. So this first point that we have is point V, and so we're going to write our x, y coordinates. We always have to use parentheses. It's a requirement. And remember that x goes first. So label your x's if you don't remember which one's which. So I can see that this one is located at -7, +5. So I'm going to say -7, +5. And in general, I don't actually want to draw these lines every time because it's going to make the graph look really confusing. But for the first few times as you're getting used to the process, it totally works. All right, D is our next point, and I can see that it's at -6, 0. I went 6 spaces to the left, but I did not move up or down at all. And then our third point is point K, and this time I didn't move left or right at all. So since I didn't move, I'm going to put 0, but then I went down 3, so that's -3. Go ahead, pause the video, and try to find these last 3 points. All right, so those are where those last 3 points are located. Take a moment and check that out. All right, and that's all we have today. Hopefully it wasn't too bad and it makes a little bit more sense. And until next time, I'll see you later. Love you, bye.